And time for another Coffee with Kilroy, or what I like to call, sometimes, beverage in a book. My beverage, well, I think you know what that is. I'm going to have me some coffee. You will drink what you want to. Just make sure your doctor approves. The book, I'm back to it. Tales of War. This is great stories from military history for every day of the year. There are 365 entries, I think, military history type entries. And today is November 22nd. And so what are we going to find out on that happened on November 22nd? In this book, I think there might be a little bit of a teaser here. Let us see. Let me get my coffee. Let me get this out of the way. Move this out of the way, and let's take a look at the book and see what we have inside here. So let's turn to November 22nd. Warwick the Kingmaker. 22nd November. Let's see if I can get a little bit closer so you can read along. You can follow along at home. 22nd November, Warwick the Kingmaker. 1428. Today, Richard Neville was born in Bisham, 30 miles west of London. By his daring exploits, he came to be called by one of those magical names that echo down the centuries. Warwick the Kingmaker. The man who made two men king of England during the Wars of the Roses. The Wars of the Roses were a series of dynastic conflicts fought for the crown between the House of Lancaster and York amid the anarchy of the 15th century England. The Lancastrians had ruled since the usurpation of Henry IV in 1399, but now the king was the pious and weak-minded Henry VI, who had never had effective control of the country since inheriting the throne at the age of 9 months in 1422. Now great barons ruled their territories with private armies, and chaos reigned. Richard Neville was the son of an earl, but he attained his own earldom not from his father, but by his marriage to the sister of the Earl of Warwick. When he was 21, he inherited the earldom through his wife, making him the richest man in England, including the king. He was also the most dynamic and capable, and the most ambitious. Allied with the House of York in 1455, Warwick played a major role in the First Battle of the War of the Roses at St. Albans. See 22nd May. Ooh, I got something to do on May 22nd. 6 years later, he made his first king, providing the armed muscle to help Yorkish Edward IV usurp the throne from the ineffective Henry. During the first 3 years of Edward's indolent reign, Warwick virtually ruled the country, but then Edward married Elizabeth Woodville, and soon her relatives were displacing him in the king's councils. Unable to dominate Edward, in 1470, Warwick daringly switched sides, and in a matter of months invaded England with a force from France and restored the hapless Henry to the throne, while Edward fled to the Netherlands. Behind it all lay no loyalty to any king, but Warwick's determination to the country's most powerful man, perhaps with luck even to become king himself. Only a year later, however, Edward returned to England at the head of an army. On Easter Sunday, 14th April, the armies of Edward and his former supporter clashed at Barnet, just to the north of London. Both armies had reached the field of battle on the previous evening and had spent the night within earshot of each other. The next morning, Warwick rose at 4 o'clock to brief his soldiers and order his cannons to open fire. But the day was still dark, and the field... Oh, I can't read that. Sorry. Was shrouded in fog, so the stones fired by his primitive cast-iron artillery carried over the heads of the enemy he could not yet see. Then, in the words of historian Paul Murray Kendall, quote, Warwick signaled his trumpeters, archers, and gunners fired into the blankness of fog. Close ahead, the trumpets of Yorkish rang out. A great shout gave notice that they were coming on a run. With a crash of the two hosts came together out of the murk. In order to buoy his men, Warwick was fighting on foot like his soldiers rather than from horseback, having ordered his war steeds taken to the rear. At first, the battle seemed to turn in his favor, but then, in a mix of the fog, his ally Oxford cavalry accidentally fell on his brother Montagu's flank. Amid cries of treason, Warwick's lines under the severe attack from Edward began to collapse. Seeing that the situation was hopeless, Warwick turned to regain his war horse behind the lines, but encumbered by heavy armor, he was soon surrounded by Edward's soldiers. One forced open his visor with an axe, another plunged in his sword. The next day, Edward had Warwick's body, naked except for a loincloth, displayed at St. Paul's in London, there for all to see that the Kingmaker was actually dead. Warwick was then buried in Bisham Abbey, but during the reign of Henry VIII, the abbey was destroyed and his tomb and bones obliterated. Such was the end of the man who put two kings on the throne and died still hoping to become one himself. Quite an entry. I quite enjoyed that entry. So that's Tales of War, November 22nd. This is the beginning of Warwick the Kingmaker. And actually, it was my entry into the history of the War of the Roses. Was through Kingmaker, the game by Avalon Hill. Actually, this game predates, in my opinion. Everybody talks about diplomacy being a game that a good way to kill friendships. This was the game that was the game that helped me kill some friendships. Let me have a drink here. There's a lot of when you play this with multiple players, which is probably the best way to play this, there's quite a bit of back and forth and changing of sides, just like we saw in that entry there, and treachery. And I was subject to all that in my attempts to put a king on the throne in this game, but still love it to this day. This was a classic game. A little, it got updated by some I guess, expansions or upgrades that kind of helped it out, some of the battle deck and everything. But, still an excellent game, albeit a little long in the tooth. This game did have a tendency to kind of outstay its welcome. There is a new version of this either just came out or coming out, or maybe it came out last year or a couple years ago. I don't know what they did to update it, but I still enjoy this classic Avalon Hill version. Guys, my box is kind of pumping up a little bit because all my cards are sticking out. I gotta put the cards down a little bit. Anyway, so Kingmaker, this is a strategic view of sorts, kind of operational, but somewhat of a strategic view of the War of Roses. It gives you definitely a flavor of all the different lords and how they changed their alliances and loyalty over time. Somewhat of an abstracted combat system and some luck of the events and plague and what have you, but still like this at the strategic level. If you want to have something more on the operational level, well, then may I interest you in Plantagenet, which is produced by GMT, and I'll put a link to the video. I covered this, an unboxing of this. I haven't done a play of this yet. I need to. This is part of the Levy and Campaign series, which focuses on medieval operational scale. And this is an excellent game, covers very flexible in the Levy and Campaign series in that it kind of covers all the different variety of different lords that might come in or come out of play during the game and changing alliances and the like. Very interesting game. And again, focuses kind of on the operational. So you're going to levy and campaign. You're going to need to raise forces. You're going to need to try to keep them on your side for a time period. You're going to have to supply them, and then you're going to have to play the right orders to try to get them to go where they need to be when you need them to be there. So that is Plantagenet from GMT Games. Now, at the tactical level, I've got 3 games at the tactical level. One is somewhat of a true tactical level game, into the battles themselves, and the other 2 are somewhat tactical but somewhat abstract. So let's talk about the true tactical game first, and I got to make some room for it because all these others are taking up the space. Blood and Roses. This is part of the Men of Iron series. This was volume 3, and then I think it was included in the tri-pack of Men in Iron, but I bought them separately. In fact, the last one I bought of the series was Men of Iron. I bought the other ones first, so call me a rule breaker. But this is Blood and Roses. This is battles in the War of the Roses, 1455 to 1487 by Richard Berg. This is kind of, to me, is a little bit more of a simplified version of the Great Battles of History, which covers ancient conflict. This covers medieval, and I think it does it very well in that regard. This is, I say simplified, this just feels a little bit easier to get into and get out of and play than Great Battles of History, and it shares some similar concepts of especially of how command is handled. Next up on kind of the tactical, kind of tactical, but this is a card game. This is Son of York, game designed by Mike Nagel. This is dealing with, again, the War of the Roses, but this is a card game at its heart. There's some dice rolling in it as well, but it's, using the cards to represent lords, but also the events and what have you. Is a fine game, but somewhat abstract in its rendering. And then the last game I want to talk about here is Table Battles. Now, this Table Battles covers several different battles, and one of them is Bosworth, so that took place during the War of the Roses, and so that's covered in here as well. Now, this is a card game at its heart as well, but really more of a dice game. You're going to have these wooden planks here, which are kind of cool, represent kind of the strength of the forces, and you'll have cards representing each of the key forces, but you're rolling dice, and certain forces can attack other certain forces. It's kind of based on matchups of the actual historical battle and how those were played. But again, very abstract, but actually plays, is probably the quickest of any of these games. This plays relatively fast and is entertaining and is interesting. So, going back through these, something I'd like to talk about is how Warwick is represented in each of these games. So, again, this is a card game, so you're going to have Warwick represented by a card. In fact, he's represented by 2 cards because, he changes side. In fact, you have a special card here, a Warwick. So this is dealing with kind of the treason of the Warwick. That's a special card here. But you're going to have their abilities that are represented in this card. And again, this is kind of card-based, but you're going to roll dice for the conflict or for the combat. And this shows what battles that he is in. This is Richard Neville Warwick, so he's represented by cards here. And I found that, kind of interesting. Then when we get to Blood and Roses, well, he's not going to be represented by cards. He's going to be represented by counters. And, of course, there's a counter for each side because you got to have a counter for each side because it is Warwick, isn't it now? And so there's all the different stats that you have. And he's got a little bit different stats, I believe. Well, maybe not. I thought he might have different stats. So he's the same Warwick, but he plays on different sides, plays for different teams. So there he is there. Then we get to Plantagenet, and he, again, got to have 2 cards for Warwick. And there they are, and there are the different abilities that are represented in this game: influence, lordship, command, valor, and what his starting retinue is, and places to hold some of the supplies and what have you. But there is Warwick there, and of course, different backs because he represents different sides. And then we'll end on the one that I started with, and there is good old Warwick there. Now, I would kill to get Warwick. Everybody wanted Warwick because he's had 50. This is the number of troops that they start off with kind of as their base. And then, of course, you can add titles to them, and you can add troops under them and mercenaries, and you want to build a big force because you want to have enough troops to go into combat. And plus, it also showed kind of what the power or whatever in the Lords in the House of Commons and what you had there. But that 50 was huge, huge. And so everybody wanted Warwick, and I really, I've always enjoyed, or always was, felt comfortable when I had him on my side, although my backstabbing friends would make me pay for having him. Anyway, so there you have it. That is Kingmaker. There are some of the games that I have that cover the War of the Roses. I have a few more, but those are the big ones I wanted to point out, showing you kind of at different scales too, as from strategic, operational, and tactical, and abstract, and the like. So there you have it. That is what I have for you on this November 22nd. War of the Roses, Richard Neville, Warwick the Kingmaker. Hope you're enjoying your coffee. Hope you're enjoying your day. If you're watching this later in the day, I hope you had a good one, and hope you still have some good evening left. Take care. Thanks for watching.